I really believe we need to define the midlife stage, developmental stage, with menopause being a part of that, like how adolescence has puberty as part of it. But we don't just say puberty as a stage, we say adolescence. So I think it's really lacking. Not a lot of people are really talking about it. And I think it's one of the reasons there's so much noise out there because we haven't defined the needs.
I'm Anne-Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hot flash ink.
You're all woman to me. All right, Anne-Marie.
Okay, good. We're on. It's so nice to meet you, Maryann. We've just been talking a little bit, but I feel like you're my sister in common sense questions in this midlife space. I was so happy to find you because normally new people are cropping up and you're like, okay, it's going to be the same old thing. And then you're just this breath of fresh air, just asking questions about this stuff. Like, where does your approach come from?
Well, so I'm a dietitian by trade. And when I had kids late, my second kid, I was 3 days before I turned 40. So I started to, because I hadn't worked with kids before, I looked into child nutrition and I started a blog and learned all about developmental stages and how to feed and support kids as they get older for their health. My kids are older now, they're teenagers. And I was in my 47, I think. And I was driving to a field trip and I had the worst, my heart rate started increasing. And it was like I was driving another mom and I'm just like, what do I do? And I remember this from before because when I was 30, I had similar. So I'm like, let's just start talking and get my mind off of it. But what followed was horrible anxiety. I had heart palpitations. I couldn't swallow very well. So I started losing weight and I was just like, what is going on? So I started dipping my feet into the research to see, is this perimenopause? Like I had regular cycles. And so that just opened up the floodgates. And then I'm like, I'm going to focus on midlife, menopause, perimenopause, maybe write a book, and then maybe go back to kids. I didn't know for sure. And then as I was doing research, I realized this is just such a big topic. Do I need to go on hormones? And I just started digging deeper. I found Jerry Lynn Pryor, actually interviewed her, learning about progesterone, and just assuming that my symptoms were due to hormones. And then right around 50, I got diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia. And once I corrected that, like all my symptoms went away. And so I was like, when I did a lot of research on iron deficiency, realized I was not anemic, but iron deficient for many years. And no doctor found it. And so I wrote about it. I wrote about ferritin, which is how you test iron. And a lot of women wrote into me asking their doctor, realizing that they were iron deficient. And then in 2020, the dietary guidelines came out and they took a life stage approach. And so I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see what they say about midlife. So I start going in there and I see infancy, adolescence, adults, and they lumped all the adults together from, I'm not sure exactly, like 18 to 65. And then it was 65 plus was older age. So there was no mention of midlife. And so that for me was like, there's nothing on midlife. There's menopause, but the stage of midlife, which is generally between 40 and 65, is just not defined hardly at all. And Margie Lockman, who is a developmental psychologist, in 2015 called us out. We have no research on midlife. We have no societies, professional societies. Right now there's one journal. There was a midlife health women's journal, but that closed last year. Compared to like infancy, there's like 20. Adolescence, 15. I don't know about the numbers exactly. Older ages, 9. But midlife, there's 1. And then of course there's menopause, has some journals, not quite as much as the other areas. So it just really overwhelmed me. But I really believe we need to define the midlife stage, developmental stage, with menopause being a part of that, like how adolescence has puberty as part of it. But we don't just say puberty as a stage, we say adolescence. So I think it's really lacking. Not a lot of people are really talking about it. And I think it's one of the reasons there's so much noise out there, because we haven't defined the needs. So that's a long answer.
No, I love it, because you say often, is it menopause or is it aging, and where is it? And there's so many people speaking really definitively about menopause. And what you're pointing out is like, how is that possible? Because the whole space is not even recognized or covered.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just dive in, because you said something in one of your newsletters. You said the menopause narrative, like you call it the menopause narrative, particularly about heart health. What is the menopause narrative to you? Because I talk about the menopause narratives, plural, a lot.
For me, I was talking about heart health, but basically it's like women are protected against heart disease and all these different ailments until about 50, when the risk goes up. And so somehow what this is saying is that the effects of aging are only because of our hormones. But in reality, aging is happening after 30. There's just gradual changes. It's like this. And we don't really notice it until our 40s. And then once our hormones start to first fluctuate and then decline, just speeds it up. So it's really like it's aging plus change. I call it aging pause. And the problem is that I see that's going on, and that I fell into, was blaming everything on our hormones, that we're not getting help. Like I just assumed this was my hormones, but it was really iron deficiency. And if you think about it, we're bleeding heavier and perimenopause, and we've gone longer probably with periods, because a lot of women are on the hormonal birth control when they're younger versus older. And aging definitely is a huge part of it. And then you mix, it's like the hormones like shake everything up and bring everything to light. And they're important, and it's important to focus on hormones, but we're leaving out the aging part. And with heart health, it definitely, aging plays a key role. Menopause in some ways was due to aging, or aging ovarian health. So yeah, that everyone just assumes if they can get the hormones, then everything will be fine. But as we know, the research doesn't show that. And so we just keep looking for answers in hormones instead of this other side, that we're aging too. And what's happening with that aging, we're not doing enough to figure that out.
Yeah, that sometimes bothers me about the supremacy of the hormone therapy part of the conversation, just that there are so many other things that could need attention. And I wonder, do you ever wonder as well what that focus on hormones are diminishing, replace the hormones, does to these other things that are happening because of aging? Are we doing ourselves a disservice if we don't pluck through and try to figure it out?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. And also it's not about, I'm definitely think hormone therapy is important. It should be offered. We're still in the dark ages here in the US, where you hear women, like some of these doctors are blowing them off. It should be available, and women should be offered it and explain the risk benefit. But they also need to understand the aging changes, and that even if you're on hormone therapy, you're going to respond better if you have a healthier body. That's the healthy cell bias that we know, is that women are going to do better on hormone therapy if they take care of their endothelial, their blood vessel health, their overall health. And if we can develop guidelines for midlife women, it's whether they don't have to be on hormone therapy, but even if they're on hormone therapy, they still need to, it still applies, because hormone therapy it's not like your old cycles and you're not young anymore. I think it's not a deal breaker. And I think, unfortunately, women with the narrative we're hearing now, they just go on hormone therapy and they think, oh, I'm good. It's protecting my brain. It's protecting my heart. And it doesn't cause breast cancer. But that's not the full story. And I think you're one of the few people, and I think you've mentioned this about drinking alcohol and being on hormones. I've found 5 studies that show that the risk of breast cancer is much higher if you're taking hormones and drinking. And really no one at all is talking about that. It'd be nice to get some better studies. But I think my fear is women go on hormone therapy and they're like, okay, I'm taken care of. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. And the confluence between drinking, obesity, and hormone therapy really concerns me because I think you're at a much higher risk for breast cancer if you're in that obese category, which isn't that PC to say obese anymore. But if you're also drinking, that just really worries me. That's you're taking something with a very low risk, but then you also have two high risk things. And no one's talking about that.
Yeah, I think hormone therapy is there and women should be offered it. And it's great for some women to do really well on it. Some don't do as well. Some just don't want to take it. But regardless, to take care of our health, what I call, like fine tuning our lifestyle. So there's lots of things. It's not just like exercise and eat right. There's a lot of like fine tuning. And a lot of that's just based on what the research I've done, but we need way more. So I always qualify that because we just don't have enough research. I'm digging so deep because it's really neglected. I'm very passionate about micronutrient needs in women. Our hormones help us absorb there's certain ones we're at risk for. And so when we go through menopause, women are at even more increased risk, and aging affects that. And there's just so many different factors that we're like just ignoring, or not on purpose, but it's just because we're keep talking about hormones and debating. And like some people, we need the physiological levels of hormones, but there's no research on that we need to have high estrogen, like we need to make like we're ovulating again. And there's not one study I can find, but people are saying we need this. And I'm just like, what? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit funny to me. My really good friend just said my estrogens, they tested me and it's so low. And I'm like, yeah, you're 54. Like I wouldn't expect any different, like just even the way those are being tossed around and like it needs to be topped up. And it doesn't seem like that's part of what's necessary. It's more just you're at a place in time, you might need to use it. And you're the first person who said that changing the lifestyle could help the hormone therapy work better. I've interviewed a lot of people who've said, and I really like this, like sometimes you need the hormone therapy to get a footing and some sleep so you can change your lifestyle. But I think that's a really interesting two-way relationship. So can you just describe for me the micronutrients? Because I think people might not even know what you're talking about. It's like nutrients, micronutrients. What should we be looking for at this time?
Did you know I also have a Substack? That's just a fancy way of saying I have a newsletter. But listen, it's not like every other newsletter. I am the only journalist in the world who's made menopause my beat. And each week I share research, news, products, tips, and tricks from the world of menopause and midlife. Sometimes I even write an essay. Hot Flash Inc. on Substack is where I pull together everything that's here and in the menosphere. And I break it down just for you so that we can try and make sense of it all and figure out what to do together in real time. Join more than 5,000 women, practitioners, CEOs, and more, and become a subscriber today. You can get my podcast as well as special video and audio drops you can't get anywhere else. Sign up today at hotflashinc.substack.
So micronutrients they don't have calories. They're not macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, and fat provide calories. Micronutrients are much smaller amounts. They're mainly vitamins and minerals. Although they can be other, but they're mostly vitamins and minerals. Like I mentioned, iron, which a lot of women are iron deficient. That revs up your nervous system. And so that's one of the reasons anxiety can be worse, which is already happening with the hormones. The DHA and EPA. If you think about it, our hormones, if we have a cycle, you're trying to get pregnant every month. That's what your body's doing. And so it's going to increase, like you need DHA from omega-3s for brain health if you get pregnant. So it increases the plant food DHA or omega-3 to the DHA in the brain. Some studies have shown that estrogen helps to increase that. Women are a little better off if they have with their cycles. So that's a watch out. Choline is a huge one, because the enzyme that helps make choline, estrogen helps stimulate. When we go through menopause, choline is a huge risk factor, and there's just such little research. But there's some intriguing animal studies on choline and Alzheimer's. So could this be the key to why women are at higher risk is choline? They're already not getting the RDA. So they go through menopause, and it's also related to fatty liver disease. I know there's a new name for it, but so those are B12 is another one that's more on the aging side. That is our stomach acid decreases with age. We may not absorb B12. So I have a biomarker guide when you sign up for my newsletter, and it really explains these basic labs that you can get. And I think that's the best place to start. Make sure your iron's good, your B12. Vitamin D is another one that's related to estrogen. That's more known, but still, I had a friend that wasn't taking it, and it was 12. And she said, still, women are still low on vitamin D. But those are three that I think most important that most healthcare providers will check. We don't have magnesium is another one, super important, but we don't have a good biomarker. You look at your diet, and you can take magnesium. You need to make sure you're getting enough calcium too, because there's a balance there. But yeah, I think it's really important. And I really believe our needs change as we age and go through menopause. And that's the only micronutrient. Calcium is the only one that increases right at 50. But we've done a really poor job of really digging into these, especially choline, I think is really important.
Yeah, I went viral on TikTok in February with 2 million people watching a video I made off the cuff just about how it's really becoming mainstream. You're seeing articles about the anticholinergic drugs and the links to dementia, the associations with dementia.
Yeah.
And obviously it doesn't mean if you took Benadryl to go to sleep that you're going to get Alzheimer's disease or dementia. It doesn't mean that at all. It just seems like the research that was readily available there to Google is now people are actually writing about it in mainstream, putting it together. I wondered what you thought about that, because so many people have taken those first generation antihistamines and the sleeping medications. And I heard so many going viral like that is absolutely wild and terrifying, but you just hear from the whole world and the saddest stories, like people saying, my mom took it her whole life and she didn't get dementia. My mom took it her whole life and she has dementia. I just wonder what you think, if there's a role to play there in the actual taking of those meds and then the function in the brain.
Yeah, I think there is. And unfortunately, nobody's doing much about it. And there's also genetic mutations. Some people actually need twice as much choline because they're missing because of their genes. And so there might be really vulnerable people. Someone may take anticholinergic and they'd be fine, but someone who maybe has this genetic, they already need more. And then another medication I don't like is proton pump inhibitors.
Yeah.
Sec. Okay. It's over the counter now. It's anything, that you would take for heartburn. And they're basically what they do is increase the pH of the stomach. So they make our stomach work less well. And we need stomach acid to absorb B12. There's 6 micronutrients. And a lot of times women in midlife, they'll get heartburn and then they give a PPI, which is supposed to be temporary, just to heal, it's either to heal.
What is it? What is one of the drugs?
Huh?
What are the names?
Proton pump inhibitors.
What are the, what?
Yeah, proton pump inhibitors.
Yeah.
Sec. Okay. It's over the counter now. It's anything, that you would take for heartburn. It's over the counter. They have it over the counter now. I don't know how long that's been. So yeah, I think there's a lot of research that's related also to dementia, some increased risk, higher blood pressure, when there's some different theories. And lower nitric oxide is also a potential reason. It's a little complicated. But yeah, I think these medications, and it's funny, estrogen we don't have that over the counter, but we have these drugs that are harming us over the long term.
So you brought up nitric oxide. I'm so interested, and you've written about this really well, but can you just describe what nitric oxide is, how it works in our body, and why we might want to be thinking about it in midlife?
Yeah, nitric oxide is a signaling molecule that 3 scientists received the Nobel Prize for in 1998. And that was for its work in cardiovascular. So it's a signaling molecule that mainly is produced from our endothelial cells. And those are the cells that line our arteries. And so it's just a nitrogen and an oxygen. And it has a really short half-life. So your body has to keep producing it. And it helps to vasodilate. So it dilates blood vessels and it helps increase blood flow. And so that's really important if you think about it. So estrogen and progesterone help to increase nitric oxide. And again, if you're thinking about a cycle, the body's trying to get pregnant, it needs to get all the nutrients and oxygen where it needs to go. So it really it helps your circulation and blood flow. But it also plays many roles. It plays a role in your immune system and gut health, sleep, insulin sensitivity. So it's really important, and it's relatively new. So like 26, when they got the Nobel Prize, now it's 26 years. Nathan Bryan, he's done a lot of research. I've talked to him. He says usually it takes 17, 20 years for everything to catch up. We're just not really talking about it enough. You'll hear about it here and there. But basically, if you think about it, like a young child has a ton of nitric oxide. They have good blood flow. They're growing, right? As we're growing and developing, we have a ton of nitric oxide. And then from 20 to 40, it decreases by half. So by the time you're in your 40s, your nitric oxide is already decreased. And then when you go through, it's just like everything. You're going like this, and then menopause, and then it speeds it up. And then our hormones first fluctuate, and that means nitric oxide is going up and down and could be causing some problems. And then as they decline, it goes down even more. And the reason that it goes down with aging is thought that inflammation and oxidative stress, which whenever you have one, you have the other. Typically, they're like an annoying couple that is always together. So when someone's talking about inflammation, there's going to be oxidative stress. And where there's oxidative stress, there's going to be inflammation. And so as these rise, as we age, nitric oxide goes down. So it's like what is it called? A seesaw. And so that kind of happens gradually. Like all things aging, it's over time. It's not, but menopause is a faster transition. And so I believe, based on what I've read, and we need more research, is that this is a lot of the reasons we're fatigued, although it could be other things. I believe they play a key role in hot flashes. There are some interesting studies on that, and we need way more. The good news is you can take hormones and that will help increase nitric oxide, but there's a lot of other things you can do. So another way that we make it is through nitrates in our diet. So nitrates are found in green leafy vegetables, celery, beets. And through a pathway, when we eat these foods, it's called the nitrite nitric oxide pathway. Basically, we develop nitrate reducing bacteria in our mouth that's in the back of our tongue. And then we swallow it, and the stomach acid helps convert it to nitric oxide. And then it goes into the system and works its way. And that's one of the reasons that getting leafy greens and eating foods rich in nitrate help to increase our nitric oxide levels. And a study came out recently with beetroot juice, and they need to do way more of these in midlife women, and it increased. It's called flow-mediated dilation. So they just test your arteries and see how much they open. And so hormones help to open our arteries, but so do the beets and the beetroot juice. And so it's just really interesting. Like I call it the One Health principle, is anytime we can lower inflammation and oxidative stress, we're going to increase nitric oxide. But then there are ways that we can increase nitric oxide by itself, and that it will lower inflammation and oxidative stress. So I'm really intrigued because, there's hormones and it's a great tool, but hormones as we age may not work as well. And it's not, there's no really good studies that show, we know women in their 50s respond better to hormones. But if you give a woman for the first time in her 60s, she's not going to get that increase as much. Maybe if she's healthier and doesn't, but the studies I've read. Now, if she starts when she's like 54, the big question is it still going to work into her 60s and 70s? I cannot find a study to show that they've looked at someone that long term and to see if they're still responding, their arteries are still dilating. But regardless, hormones, they're helpful to women, and they do, especially when they're younger, can be helpful for heart health. But I'm really intrigued by the other studies that show much more robust findings in older women, like the breathing studies, the resistance breathing. A 2021 study show that just 5 minutes a day of doing resistance breathing, high resistance, it's called. So you breathe through, it's called inspiratory muscle strength training, IMST, and you breathe through resistance. And you do high resistance, and then they did it 5 minutes a day. And the postmenopausal women had a great response. FMD increased, inflammation went down, CRP, and their blood pressure went down 9 points. So it just finding this simple thing you can do 5 minutes a day. I'm really intrigued with these different things women can do in addition, or whether or not they
do. You need a device for that, or can you rig something up at home?
I found a cheaper one because the Power Breathe is pretty expensive, and I use Bandalung, $30 on Amazon, and it's been great. It's helped my exercise tolerance, and so it's stuff like that. And also sauna is another way to increase nitric oxide, avoiding these nutrient deficiencies. So homocysteine can go up during menopause, and that's related to B vitamins. So watching your homocysteine, that's another way that nitric oxide goes down. So once I open the floodgates just about all these ways that we can increase nitric oxide, and of course, eating a Mediterranean diet, high in antioxidants and polyphenols. And so there's a lot that we can do as women. And I'd love to see more research, especially to see if it affects hot flashes. So yeah, I think I just got more excited about these studies than the studies I was finding on hormone therapy.
Yeah. Is it really called Expandalung? That's absolutely hilarious. I think that's in my future. Expandalung. Also, because of you, I started putting a beet in my smoothie, like a cooked beet in my smoothie. I don't even taste it. I hate beets. So I hope that's good enough. I'm going to do that every day. And then it makes it a nice color too, in case I put too many weird green things in it. It doesn't turn into an ugly color. How do you eat your beet?
So one of the things about that gets complicated is it's hard to know how much is in your food. And actually organic has less nitrates. Now I buy conventional spinach because I still buy other organic food, but some of these products are interesting. The one used in the study is called Beet It, beetroot juice. I personally, the taste is really hard on me. So I use Super Beets, and that's a human N and I don't use it every day, but an hour or two before exercise. And they have these chews too. So there are some of these products. I think women just need to be careful, make sure they're tested. And both these products, the Beet It and the Human N, they're used in studies, and they have a really good advisory board. And so I feel confident in those products. And there's some interesting research being done on postmenopausal women and exercise, because another way to increase nitric oxide is through aerobic exercise. But as we go through menopause, some research shows we don't respond as well. Our FMD, the dilation, isn't as strong. And so there's a study called the Bee Sweet, where they're giving this beetroot juice before exercise and seeing how postmenopausal women respond to the exercise. For some reason, men have a much better response even when they're older than women do. And if you take hormone therapy, the studies show it, you do have a better response during exercise. So yeah, I find it all really interesting, and looking for just a variety of ways that women can improve their health. Because I feel really sad when I'm on social media and I see a 60-some-year-old or even a woman in her early 70s, and they're talking about how you needed to be in this window to be on hormones. And they're like, oh, I can't do anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much you can do. Really, honestly, it's not just hormone or nothing. It's try hormones, do hormones, and whatever, but also let's look at all these different things that we can do.
Have you ever looked at pycnogenol, the French maritime pine bark? Because I think it works to increase nitric oxide.
It does. And I remember you saying you were on it. And so one of the things I always do is whenever I hear about something, I search it with nitric oxide, and almost every time nitric oxide plays a role, and it does, it increases nitric oxide, and that helped with hot flashes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it helps with many things because of that. Like you're not waking up in the night. So it does help with sleep, and it helps skin. And I mean, it's a really well-studied supplement that you never hear about. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I sometimes wonder about this one supplement because I found it anyway very effective, and just randomly heard about it in a Facebook group. Mouth taping. Are you like on the mouth taping train?
Yeah. So it's especially if so after 40, we're 5 times more likely to breathe through our mouth during sleep. A friend of mine came to me and she's like, I'm waking up with headaches. I've been waking up in the middle of the night. I'm like, is your mouth dry? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, I think you're breathing through your mouth. And I like the myo tape because you're not like covering your mouth. It just goes around it.
Oh.
And I've actually been taking it. I'm definitely a nose breather, but every once in a while, like I wake up snorting and I'm like, what is that? But if you have sleep apnea or something, you want to be careful and make sure you're getting treated. Because we don't have enough research. But one of the things about breathing through our nose is nitric oxide lines our passages. So it's another way, like when we breathe through our nose, we get some nitric oxide. And so it's just a much healthier, one of the things that happens, and one of the reasons I think the breathing study so effective is our breathing muscles get weak, like our diaphragm and our intercostal muscles get weak too. And when we strengthen that, we breathe more efficiently. And so our body's getting oxygen, it's, much more effectively. And so when we don't have enough oxygen or, it starts to go down, that increases inflammation. And then, so it's like, then that One Health principle gets kicked in. And so these are all hidden things that women don't even know about. And, hormone therapy has mixed results. Sometimes it helps our breathing, sometimes it doesn't, so it's kind of a mixed bag. Louise Oliver, she's a breathing practitioner. I interviewed her. She works with midlife women and helping them learn to, some of them are mouth breathing. But if you tape your mouth, if, you're pretty sure you have no obstruction and stuff, and I like the myo tape. I think it really can prevent even just the opening of your mouth, because these muscles get weak too. And I don't think I breathe out of my mouth, but then it closes your airway, or it just narrows the airway, and then your body wants to wake up because then you're not getting enough flow. So I think it's actually a hidden cause of sleep problems in women. I read one study that 80% of postmenopausal women have sleep disorder breathing that have insomnia. So 80%, I mean, it's one study and it's an older study, but no one's talking about this. We're all talking about get sunlight, do this. Well, what about, is our airway open? Like, are we breathing through our nose? So I'm like, why aren't we taught how this is so important? And it doesn't have to just be like, get on a PAP, there's devices, there's breathing exercises if you catch it soon enough. So yeah, that's another thing, like our breathing is so important. Slowing our breathing, those exercises help to really calm our nervous system. If we do it every day, then we start to breathe slower, overall. That helps also increase, the One Health principle. Some studies show may help with hot flashes. They're kind of mixed. But, all these things together, it's like maybe the studies don't show that just slow breathing, but if you, do resistance breathings, you're making sure you're breathing through your nose, your diet, your this, that, it all adds up, right? Mm-hmm. So we can't just discard just because a study showed it didn't affect hot flashes, or because it's really all the little things that add up. That makes sense.
Okay. I feel like I could talk to you a lot more in the future because it's just so interesting to talk to someone who like dives into this stuff. But for now, one last question about something you always hear. And I want to know, I've seen you write about this on social media. You always hear we have hormone receptors all over our body and they're just empty. And I actually saw a doctor holding a brain and it just had all these empty parking spots on the brain. And you've talked about research that shows that we actually might make more hormone receptors. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember his name. He's a researcher who, I hate when I find this researcher and I looked it up and he passed away.
Oh, yeah, I know.
He discovered, he has a theory, we evolved in menopause. Our estrogen levels have to go low. That's in our blood. So, or else our our uterus will build up, right? Like you can't have too much estrogen. So what the body does is it converts intracellular. It makes estrogen, but it doesn't show up in your blood. So your blood levels may be low, but you're making it in your cells. Now, you may not be making a lot. I'm not saying that that's like enough but I think from what I've read is some women, so you make it from DHEA and so if you have a higher DHEA, I think some women just may make it easier than other women. There may be some women who really do have an estrogen deficiency because maybe they don't make it as well. I think that's an interesting area to go into, but you do make estrogen, and I think you can make progesterone. I'm just not sure. I don't read about that as much. So intracellular, and to protect, the lining, it's not shown. It's like it makes it on the spot, kind of like a Snapchat message. It's gone, so it doesn't show up in your blood. So we don't really know how to measure it, and So we do make estrogen after it's smaller amounts. And, I'm just interested if some women just make it, are more, efficient at making estrogen. And Laura Biden talks about that when I read her book, the interest, we make it intracellularly then I'm like, I was looking that up more. And so she brings that up in her book, the hormone repair book. So it's interesting. No one really talks about it. And, if you make too much, so aromatase is the enzyme that can converts testosterone DHA to estrogen, then it spills over into the blood, stream, but you don't want too high levels if you're not taking progesterone. And you can have too high of estrone, which is the weaker estrogen, but it's not as helpful. So some women can have higher blood levels if what you're making intracellularly increases to a certain point. Is from what I understand, from what I've read. I'm not an expert on it, but yeah, I think it's interesting. And I'm 55, but I'm not menopause yet. I've gone 8 months now. So I do take vaginal estrogen. I think that's a whole nother topic. But I'm really trying to think, I don't really feel bad. And I've incorporated a lot of these, ideas from my research. And I'm just trying, should I just try it, because I've done, at this point, and I still, when I'll read someone's like, you need to be on it, it's still part of me feels like I should be on it. But I really, besides some warm flashes, I sleep good. I don't know. It's just.
I'm the exact same. I'm the exact same. I sometimes fiddle. I had some progesterone, but I have a bad gynecologist, so I can't get it. She's not bad. She just only knows about babies, and she's so scared of hormone therapy. But so I just have to, I'm lazy. I need to get another gynecologist, but it was a lot, right? Because this is my third or fourth one. But yeah, I'm the same. Some days I'm I got to try this. I can't be talking about this without trying it. And other times I'm I feel pretty good. I wouldn't take anything if I already feel good. Why would I take something? So yeah, we're in the same boat with that. It's open to it, but just sort of not sure.
Yeah, and I drink moderately too. So I'm like, okay, so if I went on hormone therapy systemic, I'd really, not that, I enjoy moderate drink, I'm very moderate. And so yeah, it's like but I don't have symptoms, so I'm doing it for not even sure what the hell, so it's like, but
there's a lot of other things you can do
if I had
to protect your heart and brain.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of other things that can be done that are really effective.
And the research is just so much more compelling to me. What I found in these other areas, that initially it was like just looking at hormones, but once I looked in these other areas, it's like, wow, there really is a lot that women can do. And I think the vagina is different. That's like, you really need to do something down there, but it doesn't have to be vaginal estrogen. It can be DHEA, or, they have the medication for that. That's a really important that women, because of the risk, there's not the same risk that was systemic, and it really should be over the counter. Like,
really should be. It
PPIs
really should.
and
yeah. Well, we'll talk about the vagina another day. Vaginas are another story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vaginas matter for sure.
Vaginas matter a lot. It's hard to fix your vagina with beets, though, I think. It's hard to pick it up. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. And I want to talk to you again. I hope you're into it, because it's just like a breath of fresh air. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy what you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I did too. I love your podcast, and I hope you keep at it, because it's the first one I listened to, and
yay,
it's great. Always. And I just downloaded the Wise Power.
Oh, that book. That was so nice to talk to them. Yeah, they're really something else. And that's what I never want anyone to miss, is this like power. We'll talk about that next time too. We'll talk about vaginas, and we'll talk about the shift, the sort of psychosocial shift, because I'm interested in what you have to say about that.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Hot Flash Inc. was created and is hosted by Anne-Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Anne-Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hot Flash Inc. Media.